And voila. All right, there we go. So really quickly, let's go the lightning round on, on the value prop up front. We are going to be talking today about a great way to expose data that you have on premises in your own data center to Azure services. So how can I take data that I have in-house and present it to and make it available to services like Azure Machine Learning to really derive value, derive information from that raw data that I have? Well, Peer's got a great solution for you that is going to show you in a concrete fashion how to do that. And what their services do, their solutions do, is they can help to move unstructured data, file data, to different Azure storage backend services. And I want you to take home one thing from this very busy slide, and that is that all of our services, whether they're disks that are presented to virtual machines, hosted managed file shares, or our object storage tier, are all built on the same underlying software-defined storage system. So this is something we've been doing for years. We've been using, all of our Azure customers use. This is something that services like Office 365 rely on. This is a very scalable, resilient, and highly performant infrastructure. And we built it to help our customers solve a couple of problems that they're all facing. Growth is at an unparalleled level. When I think about the growth that I went through as an end customer back in the day, well, it wasn't that long ago, but a couple of years ago, that's been eclipsed. Like, I never imagined with the introduction of new types of data, sensor data, the continuing aggregation of historical data that's used for log analysis systems, for predictive maintenance systems in manufacturing, the new types of data that are now being collected, aggregated, and used by companies has really made the growth explosive. And customers, you all, are faced with new ways to help you manage that deluge of data. And if you have to store it, you also have to protect it. So things like backup and rapid recovery become more complex when you have these massive data estates. And these are all great areas where the cloud can help. And I mentioned the aggregation of historical data. Well, with new legal regulations like GDPR or any industry regulations that you face, or if you make a product that is consumer facing, chances are at some point you are going to need to find data that was originally written years ago and quickly deliver that to a legal entity to help in a case. So data really isn't cold anymore. There is no such thing as data that can be stored and made inaccessible, and it takes days or weeks to retrieve it. That's just not the case anymore. And these are all things, growth, data protection, and keeping data online, that a cloud platform like Microsoft Azure Storage can really help you with, and a solution like Peer can help facilitate. And then finally, there's a big reason why cloud is becoming a great way to solve these problems. And among them are the obvious financial benefits. Cloud storage is like any cloud service where you pay for what you use and nothing else. You're not buying up front. You're not having to pay for idle resources that are sitting there. You actually pay for what you use. And it's available on demand when you need it. And you don't have to outlay huge amounts of cash to build out an infrastructure that is there to accommodate growth. You pay us for that growth as the growth occurs. And really, as a former storage administrator, I'm in love with the fact that data that moves to Azure Storage doesn't need to be moved again. It stays there when equipment life cycles end. We are responsible for that equipment life cycle and the maintenance of it. We are responsible for replacing old equipment with new equipment. You don't have to do that. You don't have to migrate the data from one platform to another. We are responsible for making sure that there's enough back-end hardware, enough back-end capacity to meet your needs and all of our customer needs. And when something new is introduced in our infrastructure, the latest, biggest, fastest, and greatest piece of equipment, new software capabilities, new value-add features and functions, those are available to you right away. You don't need to buy a new platform. You don't need to buy new software licenses to support these things. It's available by virtue of you being an Azure Storage and an Azure subscriber. And then finally, all of these resources are available to you on demand. So you're going to hear some great use cases today with what Peer can do to bridge the gap between on-premises and Azure services. And that allows you to leverage next generation capabilities like artificial intelligence, machine learning, advanced analytics without having to build out that infrastructure in your own building. You're able to leverage what we've built already and get the value, derive information from your raw data much, much more quickly. So I'm going to leave you with the fact that this is a continuing series of events. For now, we are aggregating the event calendar and also providing links to the playback of each one of these events on azurestorage.cloud. We are going to be moving that from my pitiful little website to microsoft.azure.com. So things are going to look much more professional going forward. And we're going to give you a great way to access that back catalog of videos and find out about upcoming events. And over on the right-hand side of your interface, you will see a Q&A panel. Please use that to ask any and all questions. There are no dumb questions, and there will be no public shaming. That's not how we work here. As a matter of fact, you can submit your questions anonymously. No one will know who you are, not even me. And I will relay those questions to our great panel of presenters here in the form of Matt and Duane. Guys, I am going to load your deck up here for you, and Duane, you will be able to take over as presenter here in a second. And when you are ready to go through your demos, just give me a quick heads up, and I will switch over to that demo feed for you. And you guys are in good shape. And sorry we left your deck in the middle there, but hey, we're giving everybody a sneak peek. So without further ado, Duane, the floor is yours, my friend. I am going to mute and let people hear from the interesting folks on this call.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate it. So to all of you, my name is Duane Laflotte. I am the CTO here at Peer Software. Over the next hour, we'd like to go over and show you just how do you leverage Azure in a much better way. How can we, when you see here, bridging the data divide, how do we bridge on-prem to the cloud, and how do we allow you to leverage all of the great analytics services, artificial intelligence, machine learning, with the data and infrastructure you have today? How do we bridge that into the cloud, and how we give you sort of a way of doing that in an easy and real-time way? So, Peer Software. Let me tell you a little bit about Peer Software, just to give you context as to why are we in this business and what do we do, right? So a lot of you may or may not have heard of Peer Software in the past. The company has been around since 1993, so we have a long-standing history. And frankly, what we do is deal with unstructured data. So like Carl said, all that file data that's sitting around, that's our day-to-day business, is making sure that that data is in the right place at the right time when you need to use it. So Peer over the years has done things like migrations, so you'll see that on the list here. We've done things like collaboration and file sharing, right? So with customers with multiple offices, potentially different types of platforms. So in the bottom of the slide here, you can see we have things like NetApp filers. So I have a NetApp filer potentially in Hong Kong. Maybe I have an EMC Iceland. Maybe I have a few Windows servers, a bunch of different branch offices. And from there, what I want to do is have the ability to have my file data move around, replicate as need be. And then as users access that data locally on the storage device near them, have it then simultaneously update and replicate elsewhere. So that's our collaboration piece we've been doing for a long time. Home share and VDI, as users move around, as we see organizations starting to scale and use things like virtual desktops, infrastructure, or users just traveling from office to office. How do we make sure that all of their data exists there or exists up in the cloud where it's accessible by that user? And then high availability and disaster recovery, right? It's much easier today, instead of building a brand new data center somewhere else, to allow that high availability and DR capability to be handled by Azure. But how do we easily and seamlessly replicate that data up into Azure to make sure it's highly available? And that's where Peer will come in and we'll show you some of that as well. But one of the other things I'd like you to show you today as well is a little bit around our replication in real time. So you'll see here real-time replication to Azure and full feature analytic ready sync and replication to Blob. So I'll unpackage this over a couple different slides and we'll take a look at a demo as well, but let me explain it here. So Peer has invested a lot of time in the 25 plus years that we've been in the market engaging with storage devices in real time. Right, so for Windows, we're Windows servers, and this is just software, right? So we're a Windows service, watching reads and writes and deletes and permission changes, etc. For NAS devices, we actually have invested the time in putting connectors to talk to their proprietary interfaces. So for example, someone like a NetApp filer. With a NetApp storage device, they actually have an interface called fPolicy where we can receive real-time notifications, but we are not in band. So I'm not in between the NetApp and the end users or the applications using it. I can see all reads, writes, deletes, permission changes, etc. on the side, get notified in an asynchronous channel. And then from there, I can replicate those anywhere I want. And that might be up to blob storage, which we'll see a demonstration of here as well. It may be just up to infrastructure as a service up in Azure. Maybe we're running some VMs up there, and I'm replicating that file data in real time, allowing me to have HA and disaster recovery as well. Now, the reason we say analytics ready is because the data that we replicate up to Azure is exactly as it is on-prem. So if it's a Word document and I've replicated it up to infrastructure as a service on a VM, up on that VM, it's a Word document. If I'm replicating it for either backup, high availability, recovery, or analytics, when I replicate that file up into Blob, that object is not encrypted, it's not compressed, it's not in a proprietary format that machine learning and cognitive services can't use. We're putting that object up transparent. So it is the Word document that's on-prem is now a Word document that's sitting in a Blob object that can now be leveraged by things like cognitive services to do all sorts of search and analytics on it. And we'll look through that as well. So let's talk about a little bit about where customers are leveraging Peer today and just some of the key features of the platform itself. So you'll notice here real-time replication. I touched on that just a little bit. So real-time replication is important in that A, we're not in band. So I'm not sitting in front of the storage device slowing things down. Frankly, a lot of these storage devices and NAS devices are very, very fast. You don't want to put anything really in front of them. So it's real time, but in a very efficient way. We're on the side and watching what's going on. Delta level replication. This is key, and this is actually very key with Azure as well. So with Delta level replication, what I have the ability to do is, let's say I have a customer that's doing video editing, and they're AVIs, and they're very large files, and they make a small annotation, and it ends up to, maybe it's a 1 gig file, and it ends up being 200K worth of data they change. When we replicate that file, we only replicate the 200K. There's no need to replicate the whole file again. Now, with a lot of different cloud platforms, you don't have the ability to do that. When you replicate the data up to something like an object, it's immutable. You can't change it, and you can't upload partial data. That's not the case with Azure, and this is pretty unique. So with Azure, what we actually have the ability to do is replicate up just the delta. So if you leverage a lot of really large files and they're just changed in small ways and you only want that small data to replicate up, with Azure and Peer, you now have the ability to do that, where we at the byte level can say how much data gets put up there. It's just the delta, and then that can be applied so you can see different versions of that file. Now, we also have cross-platform. If you look in the lower left-hand corner here, we do support Windows, NetApp, EMC, Nutanix, and of course, Azure. So those are our platforms that we deal with. So obviously on-prem, if you have a Windows server, EMC, NetApp device, Nutanix device, we would be installed as software there. We're watching and seeing what's going on in real time and replicating that data around. And if you want to leverage things like cognitive services and machine learning and high availability infrastructure as a service, then Azure is your destination. Now, I promise not to PowerPoint us to death. There's only a few more here. But what I wanted to do was go through just some classic sort of use cases of the software. So, okay, Duane, you've talked a lot about what Peer does in the past and what Peer is doing in the future to tie in Azure here. And you've talked about sort of some of the key features, but how do I use it? And what are customers doing with this today? So let's take one of the classic examples a lot of my customers follow here. You'll see high availability of file services across Azure regions. So in this particular case, I have a customer who's using Cloud on Tap. And Cloud on Tap is really just a virtualization, if you will, of NetApp's storage devices, NetApp's NAS devices. So very powerful at file sharing, lots of really great features, especially if you move that up into the cloud. Gives you the same paradigm of management on-prem as you have in cloud. So you might have some on-prem NetApp storage devices, and then in the cloud you have some storage devices as well. But one of the needs here was, how do I replicate the data, the file data, that's sitting on those devices in real time, right, to cut down on my recovery time and my recovery point. So I want this data to be a couple seconds old. So if one of my Cloud on Tap instances for some reason is down, my users can automatically direct over to the other Cloud on Tap instance and continue working. There's nothing they need to do. In this particular case, the customer had chosen their regions, right? I want to be in the West Coast Azure region, and I also want to be in the East Coast Azure region. And those regions, logistically and latency-wise, are far enough apart in that the classic sort of replication strategies that Cloud on Tap offers just couldn't stretch that far. And that's where Peer comes in and says, okay, well, we'll watch each of those devices in real time. And as users read and write and delete, let's say in the West Coast, we're then replicating that data all the way over to the East Coast. And we're doing that in real time. Now, we also layered a form of the DFS namespace on top of here, so that when clients are accessing West, they're accessing a DFS namespace. If West, for some reason, goes down, you decide to reboot the device, whether it's patching or maintenance or whatnot, the users seamlessly redirect to the East. So this gives you high availability, but your high availability is now spread out amongst multiple regions. The next use case, and really kind of is a classic use case for us, is the hybrid example. This is your hybrid cloud on-prem situation. I have some storage devices at multiple offices. You can see here maybe Singapore, Munich, and Miami. A couple different places that I may have storage devices, may have disparate storage devices, NetApp's, EMC Isilon, a few Windows servers here and there. But what I also want to be able to do is flex my file data up into the cloud. And I may want to flex my file data up into the cloud in the form of infrastructure as a service. So you'll see here on our Western US region, I put a Windows server, so Windows VM sitting up there. And I may also, on the Eastern side, maybe what I want to do, because I'm comfortable with NetApp, is I want to use Cloud on Tap, right? And I'm going to leverage it to store data. So how do I take all of these disparate storage systems, some on-prem and some in the cloud, and how do I make sure, A, they're in sync, B, the right data makes it to the right place at the right time, and I'm doing this in a real-time way? And that's where the Peer framework comes in. So with Peer, we monitor all the storage devices up in the cloud and on-prem, and as users read and write and delete and do anything to that file data, that unstructured data, we're making sure that in a transactional way, it's getting replicated everywhere else. So as a user, let's say, updates data in Munich, we are going to then go out and publish that data out to the other 4 sites here, and make sure that all of that data is persisted before other users have the ability to access it. That's another key feature. We do give you the ability to globally lock the data. So that way, if a user opens a file in one remote location, I can lock it in the cloud as well as everywhere it exists on-prem, giving you that transactional file system. So we talked a little bit about analytics ready replication of Blob. What's that mean? So one of the classic plays we have with our customers as well is they say, hey, listen, I have all this unstructured data that's sitting on-prem, and I have a couple different needs. One need is I'd like to replicate this data in a real-time way up into Azure Blob, right? Because this gives me the ability to have a copy of that data and give me the ability to restore that data if need be. So almost like a backup, where I could say I want to push all of my file data up into Azure Blob, and I want to create snapshots over a period of time. And I can maintain that data as long as I want. And that's where our Peer Cloud Sync part of the platform comes in. So with Cloud Sync, what we give you the ability to do is monitor all the storage devices in real time, like we've been doing for years. But now, instead of having a destination that is another storage platform, like a Windows VM or Cloud on Tap, we now give you the ability to target directly Azure Blob. When we target Azure Blob, that data, like I said, is analytics ready. It's transparent. When I take the file and I push it up into a blob, that blob now contains that file. And the metadata around that blob is the metadata for the file. So if you want to use anything like machine learning, artificial intelligence, or really any of the analytics platforms that Microsoft has, all you need to do is point it right at that blob container. And at that point, it has access to all of the data that it normally would. So there's no need to do anything custom with the objects. To expand on that a little bit, and I'll show this some in a demonstration. If I were to use external tools outside from Peer, right? So Peer replicates, let's say, a Word document up into Blob, and I want to see that Word document. I don't need to come into Peer software to do it. Frankly, I could just use Azure Explorer, right? A tool developed by Microsoft that allows me to surf and understand all the data that sits inside my Blob container, and I can go through and find that file, and I could download it and open it up, and it would be the Word document, right? So very seamless, very transparent, and it also gives you flexibility to later on leverage this in some other way. So at some point, you may have other reasons that you want to use Blob. Maybe you start to have applications that can access Blob directly. Maybe new analytics services come into play. And now you'll already have that data there and be able to leverage it. Like I know Carl had mentioned in the prior slides, things like GDPR or the need to search data. And that's not just the hot data. This is all of the data that exists on storage that you're not accessing every day. Right? Things that currently today may be on tape or out on a dark archive system. And you need to be able to look through this and analyze it. So what a great place to do that, but up in Azure. Take all the unstructured data, move it up into Azure, and then have the ability to just search across it seamlessly to give you that understanding of what's there, whether it's for regulation reasons like GDPR, or whether it's just to understand the data types that are there. The next slide here is all I want to do is point out what's our demo environment look like. So I'm going to show you a demo, but I want to explain it just so you get really kind of the feel for what it, the depth of the demonstration itself. So in my demo environment, I have a couple different things going on here. I have 5 different systems, and we'll see one of them is a client. So what would end users see? If end users were accessing, reading, writing, deleting, and doing whatever with data. I also have a cloud, I have an ONTAP instance, which is on-prem. So I do have an on-prem NetApp filer. And that NetApp storage device also houses unstructured data. And it's being monitored by one of our Windows servers that we've installed the Peer software on. So we can see reads and writes and deletes, etc. Now I also am replicating this up. We'll see these lines hopefully come in here. I'm replicating this data up into my East Coast Azure region. So we can see that I have 2 different Azure regions in play. One is the East Coast of the United States, where I have a Windows server that's running up in the cloud there, and infrastructure as a service. And then I also have a European region lit up that I'm copying data out to as well. So the first portion of this is your standard sort of collaboration and high availability. How would I have an end user, that client machine, write to an on-prem storage device, the NetApp filer, and how would I have that data then seamlessly in real time replicate up to 2 different Windows VMs that exist up in the cloud? And that's where the Peer framework gives you the ability to do that. But not only am I doing that, but I also now seamlessly want to say, well, that data that I have replicated around is all my real-time information that users are making changes to, and that's important. But I also want to push this data up into Blob. I want to be able to leverage things like machine learning, cognitive services, etc. So in this particular demonstration, I have a pretty neat little cognitive services demo I'll show you, and I'll explain that in a minute. So this is our demonstration environment, and what we think is this is pretty representative of what the direction our customers are going today. More of a hybrid approach where we have some on-prem storage, but then allowing us to flex the workload up into the cloud, whether that's just to leverage more compute or whether that's to give us the ability to have instant high availability and leverage systems that you wouldn't want to build on-prem. I don't want to build, a voice-to-text analytics engine on-prem, but that already exists inside of Azure, so I could leverage it there. Great. So, as we're not coming back to the slides, just in case there's a little bit more information, by all means, coming out to peersoftware.com is a great thing. We have all that information on our website. So, Carl, I'm going to switch over to my. Hopefully, you'll see this.
Excellent. I've got it ready for the screen sharing. I'll let you know when that comes up and folks can see it, Duane. And perfect. Yeah, that was quick. That was a quick transition. It's already up. But before you get going, we had a couple of questions come in.
Sure.
And I'm gonna paraphrase the one because I love where they were going, and I'm gonna add a little color to it. So the question, I guess, or comment really that came in was, should the folks on this call think of Peer Software's offerings as being heterogeneous file replication that helps them avoid lock-in? Really, it's kind of a Hotel California situation that people worry about with public clouds, right? I move my content in and I can never get it out. There's no way to get it out. And I think one of our viewers astutely saw this as a means to give them mobility for their file data, their unstructured data.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And frankly, that's in early on days, that's the business Peer was in. So very heavy in the replication and migration services, moving from storage platform to storage platform. And we found over time that customers really needed this feature as not as a point-in-time migration thing, but forever. I need to be able to flex to whatever type of storage and up into the cloud as it makes sense for the business and not be locked into a different storage device or a particular cloud. And that's the direction we've always gone with the software.
That's great. And then the second question that came in, I'll go ahead and tackle this one. One of our viewers here on the session asked if we had any type of, we being Microsoft, had any type of matrix that covers what Azure Files and Azure File Sync can provide versus what Peer can provide. And I responded with, no, we don't, not that I'm aware of. We do list the Azure File Sync capabilities, but I guess the way I would sum it up is, and I think that's a great request, by the way. That's something I'm going to ask our Files and File Sync team to put together, just kind of what Azure File Sync does in a simple, to view, simple to follow matrix. But in a nutshell, Azure File Sync is only focused on replicating files from Windows file servers to Azure files, and it's bound by the limitations of an Azure Files share, which today there are capacity limitations and IOPS and throughput limitations, ACLing limitations, no ability to do global file locking and collaboration, no replication to object storage, what we refer to as blob storage. So in a nutshell, between the heterogeneous capabilities, the native blob support, and the ability to get around all of those limitations, Peer is a much more robust solution, and Peer is a long-standing Microsoft partner. So That's how I would sum it up. Just a much more rich in functionality and flexibility platform that you get from Peer.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, no worries.
So you guys are now seeing this demo environment? Is that
Yes, sir. I can see your screen.
Perfect. All right. So all of the systems that were described in that prior slide are right here. So I have my client machine, and we're going to see this client machine interact with storage that exists on-prem. We're going to see what happens when data gets replicated up into the cloud. And we're going to see different information as to, which servers are getting storage, replicated to it and not. Here's my Azure East instance, and that's our Windows VM that was running up there. I also have my single pane of glass Peer Management Center. My Peer Management Center is just the single configuration and monitoring utility. I can watch all of what's going on inside the Peer framework. So I can see replication, I can set up jobs, I can set up partnerships between servers. That's all done from inside of here. I have my Northern Europe device as well. So this was my Northern Europe Azure zone, and we can see that we're replicating up here, and we can also see some shares on my F drive up here. I have a projects directory, accounting, and then a bunch of documents here. We'll leverage this to see what's going on when we're editing and replicating data. And then I also have my device that's sitting on-prem. So here you'll notice it says HQ server in Virginia. So I do have a device on-prem. It is called PTSVM 93A, so SVM being the terminology for a NetApp filer. So we have an SVM sitting in Virginia that we're in real-time replicating data off of. So as the client that's also sitting in Virginia accesses storage on this NetApp, not only will it be replicated around, but it'll also be driven in real time up to Blob storage. So let's come back to our console, and I'll walk you through a little bit here. So we have different types of jobs, and one of the types of jobs here I have is a collaboration job. And simply put, with a collaboration job, I get to specify what are the different types of devices that I want to play in a collaboration. So in this case, I have my East as well as my North European zone, so the two Windows infrastructure VMs that are up and running. And on both of them, I have an F drive. And in that F drive, I have a projects directory. And all the data that exists in there is being replicated with my SVM, or my NetApp filer, that's sitting on-prem in Virginia. So now at this point, as users open and copy and rename and delete, etc., in real time, we're layering this transactional file system to replicate that data around. So the neat thing about that is if a user is in Europe, let's say, and they access this project share, they're accessing the project share up in infrastructure as a service in Azure. When they open a file, it will lock it in the other two locations. So my on-prem NetApp filer will have that particular file locked, as well as my East Coast zone will have that file locked. So it makes it seamless for the end users. It's very much like they're all using the same exact share, but that share is now spread globally so that they get the performance paradigms they expect and their applications expect to access that data. But because we're transactional and we're locking transactionally across the world, users aren't going to run into conflicts and start corrupting data. So this gives you a pretty easy way to replicate data around, have teams of people work together, and have that data replicate up in a seamless way. Let's see what that looks like. And if I were to take a look at my event logs here, I can see all sorts of different things going on. I can see down to the second all the different replication. I can watch what's going on. So there's a lot of data in here if I want that as well. But if I were to come back to my client here, remember we're replicating the projects directory. So here I can see is my PTSVM, my NetApp filer, and I can see my projects directory. And I'm going to go into, let's say, my accounting and documents. So in my accounting and documents directory here, let's say I take this new file, and we're going to call this file Carl, because we're all talking about Carl. So we're going to take this file here, and I'm going to replicate this file up to, and I'm just working on this Carl file on the local NetApp filer. So local client talking to a local NetApp filer. Now what happened in the background is that filer now fired off a notification to the local monitoring service in Virginia that then took that file and has now replicated it out to the other two zones. So if we catch it fast enough here, we will notice that inside this console, we can actually watch the replication, but I also have the ability then to go out into the different zones. So I could go out to my European zone here. Notice Carl's already out here in my European zone. And I could do the same thing with my Azure East zone. It should be here as well. If I were to find that projects drive, accounting project, sure enough, it's right there. So we now see, okay, all that data was replicated in a very fast way. Users seamlessly, if they were to fail over, let's say my local Virginia office goes down for some reason, the NetApp filer is down for maintenance or whatnot, my users seamlessly switch over to the infrastructure as a service, start accessing the data directly there. When my device comes back on-prem, comes online, we replicate the data right back down. And we do that at a byte level. So that's your collaboration. But the other thing, remember, we had said in our demonstration is we wanted to also leverage things like synchronization up to Blob. And let's take a look at what we would do that for. So you'll notice I have this another type of job here, which is our backup job. And this is our backup and synchronization to Blob. So I'm just going to give this some name. And we'll walk through some of the settings here. We won't, and then I'll show you sort of in a demonstration really kind of what this can do. So here you'll notice you'll pick your source. The source is important. Why are we picking source? Why are we not just grabbing data? Remember, we've invested the time in creating these connectors to see in real time what's going on. How are users reading and writing and deleting and changing permissions, etc. And when we connect into those storage devices in real time and see that data, then we can replicate that out in real time. Now, does that mean you have to do this in real time? Absolutely not. You could schedule it. So you could do a classic sort of backup paradigm if you wanted to. Once a night I want to run, and I want to understand what the changes are. But the neat thing about understanding data in real time is the classic issue a lot of people run into with a backup or a synchronization to a DR site is the fact that the scan of the storage takes too long. So you get to the point where you blow out the end of your backup window. You're scanning for 2 days or 3 days to find out what the differences are. Because we're watching in real time, we know those deltas. We know which files are different. We know which files have changed. So we don't necessarily have to upload that immediately. I may hold on to that list till the end of the day. And then we drain the list of changed files. So that's something we can do here is I can schedule that to happen. Or I could have it happen in real time. If we're going to use this as not DR, but sort of a high availability, then maybe I do want this replicated in real time, and these real-time connectors matter. Now, do we need a real-time connector? No, not necessarily if we're just going to scan continually and replicate the data up, but this really gives you quite a bit of power. Now, which storage devices do I want to play in here? You'll notice I picked a Windows server. What exactly do I want to replicate up? You know, maybe I want that projects directory, and I can surf through here and pick whatever type of device storage area I like. Do I want to exclude things? Is there certain things I don't want to exist up there? You know, by default, we exclude things like temporary files and BAK files and that sort of stuff. You know, do I want to replicate my NTFS privileges? So ACL information, my DACL as well as SACL. So as Blob doesn't have the notion of sort of NTFS privilege on the blob itself, we actually attach that information to the sidecar metadata of the blob. So you do have information that you can see what was the security rights of this particular object, this blob, at the time we wrote it up. So you can see that information here as well. Do you want to use Delta level replication? Remember we said that we could do that with things like Azure. Look at all these clouds we can write out to. So you get Azure and Azure and Azure. So if you want to pick Azure, we can move on here and we can write out there. The neat thing about this as well is inside this UI, I have the ability to configure, pre-configure my storage destination. So I can set up all my, keys, my access keys to the storage blob area, so that when a user comes in and configures this, notice it says use existing credentials. I don't have to be giving these keys out to everybody. They literally can just pick a pre-configured container and then replicate the data out there. And we click next on this. Retention. how long do I want to retain the data and how often do I want to take a snapshot? So automatically I can tell Azure, and this is leveraging Azure snapshot ability inside of Blob, I can say, I would like you to take a snapshot twice a day, 3 times a day, whatever it may be at different times. And then from there, I can always roll back to any snapshot. So it gives me an easy ability to find points in time that I might want to recover data. So for example, if we're replicating data up in real time all the time up into Blob, and we're taking snapshots, in this case, at 6 a.m. So I take a snapshot at 6 a.m. and let's say at 6:30, we get hit by ransomware and it overwrites all the data locally. It's easy for me to go up and recover that data as of 6 a.m. and just push all that information right back down to the storage system. Do I want any alerts and notifications? And then just really a simple confirmation. So now that I have a job already up and running, we can see some information about that job. What's going on in the background? I can see all of the different replication, how much data we've pushed up. I can see information about snapshots, but I also have the information to see about what's going on in the background in this event log. I can see in real time what's going on. So are we replicating data up right now? Are we, did we take a snapshot, et cetera? All that information comes in here. So lots of information around what's going on. So now let's see, okay, this is interesting, but what are we going to do with it? Right, so Carl and Duane keep talking about, hey, we can replicate data up into Azure Blob, and we can use analytics, and we can use cognitive services, and we can use machine learning, and those all sound like really cool buzzwords, but really, what could I do with that? So we already talked about leveraging things like, simple things like Azure Search, maybe to dig through all the Blob objects and look for things. But up here, we've been engaging customers in other unique solutions around how would you leverage Azure Cognitive Services in a unique way. Some of our customers are talking about things like, well, I'm a call center, and maybe what I'd like to do is as calls come in, I'm recording them, and in real time, I want to replicate this data up, and then have the voice to text analytics pull the text out of the recording and pick up things like sentiment or keywords. So that's one way we've seen customers start to leverage this. I've seen customers talk about surveillance systems. I run a bunch of shops, and I want to take my real-time surveillance video, and that's just sitting on a Windows DVR system, and I want to upload that automatically in Azure, and I want real-time analytics to happen on that video in some way. One of the other interesting things, and one of the demos we've put together here today is, what if I were looking through all of our storage for a particular person? So I wanted to leverage facial recognition so that if we found a particular person, I want to get notified in real time. So as users are reading and writing and doing whatever with storage, and they copy up picture files, maybe we take pictures at events, maybe I'm a publicist or something along those lines, and we're taking tons of pictures at events, and then we're dumping all of these pictures up on a local storage device. I want all those pictures to replicate up into Blob, and then what I want is cognitive services to see those image files and say, okay, do we know any of these people? And if a high-value person pops up, I want to get notified, right? And I want to get a text message to my phone. And we're going to do just that. So let's say I want to recognize, and I'm going to take a look here inside of our Azure Dashboard here. What we've done, just to explain a little bit behind the scenes, is that as users read, write, delete, do whatever to storage, we're replicating that data up in real time. And then we have Azure functions that are actually watching the creation of this Blob data and see the image files get created, and then we're looking for a particular person. The person we're looking for is this guy right here. So most of you probably know who this is, and if you don't, I'd be surprised. I think most of the world knows who this is. But what we've done is we've used this as our reference picture for facial recognition. So if any of the files that get uploaded to my local storage device and then synchronized via Peer Cloud Sync up into Azure Blob have this person, Mr. Satya here, if he shows up, then we're going to get notified. So I have a couple different images. Right, here's one. which is interesting because this particular image, as it comes up here, you'll notice he's in the center, but there's still plenty of other faces. I also have another image over here where he's standing in the middle, but yet again, a bunch of other faces that are over here. So what we can do here is if I were to take these, I'm going to take one of these, and I'm just going to replicate this up. I'm going to put this, let's say, in my recordings directory. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to drop this in here. And what we'll notice if we're quick enough is over here inside of our cloud sync, that data in real time is getting synchronized up. So as I take a look at the synchronization in the background here, we'll notice that that image, we can see actually in data recordings, that image is already looks like it's been copied up in real time. So I can see that real-time replication of data up. If we're fast, I can actually come back out to our Azure Dashboard, maybe. And we will see that it will actually notify me. Oh, and I actually already received the notification here. So here's a screenshot of my phone as it's running right now. So we can see that Satya was found. He was found in the data recordings images B JPEG. So we actually pulled that information out, and we can even see that there's a 74% confidence that that particular person was found in that image. So really cool analytics happening in real time on data as it's getting replicated up. But the other thing that I told you is this data not only is copied up into Blob, but it's copied up in a transparent way. So if I were to take a look at what that looks like, here I'm just leveraging Azure Storage Explorer. So Storage Explorer gives me the ability just to view the container and see all of the Blob data that exists in there today. So as I go through, I can actually see my Blob container here, and I can see the storage device. Remember, PTSVM93A. So this is my NetApp filer on-prem. And then I can see I could literally surf the place that we have created the job to replicate the data up. So in this case, I have my data directory, and I can go through here, and I could look into that recordings directory if I wanted to, and we could see that that image is right here. Here's that image 2b.jpg. And we can see when this was uploaded, etc. So that data is literally right there. If I wanted to, I could right-click on this, and I could pull this down, or I could just highlight it and click download. I also have the ability, if I wanted to, if this data were deleted locally, I could restore it back. Because remember, we're also taking information, we're also creating a backup of that data up into Azure Blob. So that's easy for me to do. I literally could come through here and say, I want to recover a file. And when I want to recover a file, I can go through and say, what do I want to recover? Do I want to browse by snapshot? Remember, we had snapshots here. And then straight through here, I could pick what date am I interested in? Today is the 26th. What are all my snapshots that were created? And then just browse straight through and then surf through and find the particular file that I want to recover, whether that's inside the recordings, whether that's inside graphics, whether that's inside my documents. Check off whatever I'm interested in, click next, and just pull this information right back down with recovering all of the NTFS rights, etc. So with this, I know we're coming close to the end of the session, but what I wanted to really show you is, A, what customers are doing with Pure Software and Azure together to allow them things like high availability, disaster recovery, but also to allow them to leverage the powerful services like cognitive services that exist up in Azure today. So with that, Carl, we're done the presentation. Is there any questions that have popped up during that?
Duane, that was awesome, as always. So we did not have any questions during the session there, but I attribute that to the fact that you did a great job of making that, just crystal clear. I mean, that was outstanding, and I think you covered some really valid use cases. One of my jobs in IT, I worked for a utility company in their energy trading division, and we needed to record every phone call, and we did it with NiceLog, which is pretty standard in the industry. And anytime we had to retrieve a call, using the horsepower that we had on premises was really just brutal. It was not easy to do. Being able to leverage the power of the cloud and scale compute cores up and use a hosted service like Azure Search really, really useful. So I think you highlighted some great, and really, really useful things that that customers could do. So it's just phenomenal, and yeah, I can't thank you enough for that.
Great. Yeah, glad to help out. And by all means, if questions pop up afterwards, if the viewers are like me afterwards, they'll go, I wish I had asked this. You can get a hold of us. You can get a hold of Carl. We work very well together and have for a long time. So we're looking forward to help out and help customers move data and workloads into Azure.
Absolutely, that is definitely been my experience. Peer is just great. Duane and Matt and everybody else with Peer just could not be easier to work with. They are just 100% customer focused, and folks, I am sure there is a place inside of your company. There is something that you're doing, you're trying to do that Peer can help you do better. So, Duane, thank you so much. As always, appreciate the time. Folks, you can watch the replay of this event at aka.ms/storage showcase-peer. And you can find a link to that on azurestorage.cloud. That is Azure Storage, one word, .cloud. And I will be posting the streaming link up there. So join us in 2 weeks. We are taking next week off, but we will be back in 2 weeks, and we are moving this series to Tuesday. So look forward to seeing you there. Hope to see you there. And can't thank you enough for joining us. So great. I am going to stop the broadcast, folks. Thanks for your time. Talk to you soon.